Alright, it is time to dive back into the Alien Multiverse. We are 2 films deep so far, and it's time to talk about 3 and 4 in today's installment. These are the black sheeps of the franchise, for sure. Very divisive among fans. Most people seem to prefer 3 to 4. I flip-flop. There are things about 4 that I enjoy way more than 3. Excuse me. And I'm going to get crucified by a lot of fans for saying that. But starting off with 3, this was kind of the beginning of the series' problems. Much like later chapters in the Star Wars franchise, Fox just started mishandling the films in the Alien franchise. Some good choices, but some really bad choices that way overshadowed the good choices at the end of the day, unfortunately. Hiring David Fincher was not a bad idea, I don't think. He was definitely up-and-coming hotshot, had an incredible visual flair, knew what he was doing, technical genius. They kind of just threw him in to a film that was going into production without a finished script. They had gone through a couple of different concepts and scrapped them all and decided, I guess, to go with this idea of a bleak, barren, desolate prison planet instead of the wooden planet that was populated by monks. That would have been an interesting way to go, if you ask me. This way, it's not uninteresting, but I don't like hanging out in that world at all. It's such a depressing fucking place to be. And while I will say that I was not fond of the characters of Hicks and Newt, and I was glad to see them out of the picture, because these are movies about Ripley at the end of the day, and her having to kind of deal with this threat that stalks her across the galaxy, by herself, really, ultimately. I thought it was really immature the way they handled it, to just kind of arbitrarily kill them in the opening credits, in a way that is not earned at all. It just felt like so many other products of the 90s, and especially the films of David Fincher, so full of kind of superficial, stylized, edgelord posturing, just bleak and nihilism. That happened really quickly in the 90s. It became a joke really fast. And so a lot of those films don't really hold up for me, including, and again, I'm going to get some shit for this, I'm sure, but Seven, David Fincher's first official film, like the one that he really owns. Alien 3 and 7 are very similar in some ways, in that they both are so fucking nihilistic and depressing, but also exploring religion and its role in a society that is in a very bleak and depressing place. In the case of 7, the implication seems to be that religion is making things worse, that the dogma and repression of religious ritual brings out the worst in people. Where in the case of Alien 3, they are already in the most hopeless place imaginable, and life is bringing out the worst in them. And this idea that religion might be the only thing keeping them from turning evil at the very least, even if they don't survive. They will get to the end of their lives with their souls intact, hopefully. That seems to be, even if it's all bullshit, that seems to be the theme going on in Resurrection. It's not an uninteresting theme, it's not an invalid theme to explore in science fiction films, but because the Alien series established itself so deeply and firmly, in my opinion, as horror, using sci-fi tropes to tell a horror story. These are monster movies at the end of the day. And they come from the twisted universe of H.R. Giger's brain, which means that they are very, very Freudian and very psychosexual fairy tales, fever dreams. So exploring things in this more lofty, Star Trek-y, like, oh, what is existence? And kind of, it doesn't work. And that too, for me, is where Prometheus and Covenant fall apart. They try to bring this kind of Star Trek, going into space to find God energy, into a film that is really just a fucking, hypersexualized Freudian slasher film at the end of the day. So, we do go back to basics, and that is the thing that I enjoy the most about Alien 3. Instead of a bunch of fucking Marines running around blowing the shit out of everything, and the aliens' threat factor being reduced so highly, even though there are more of them now, we're back to a handful of people, one creature, and no guns in an isolated setting. And that is fantastic. So we get back to that cat and mouse stalk and slash element. That is my favorite thing about the film. I think it totally works. But other than that, even though this was something that Sigourney wanted to do, like her three big things in the franchise that she wanted to do with her character was have her not use guns, have her die, and have her make love to the alien. And she got to do all of those things, interestingly enough, in that order. She was forced to use guns at one point, but she totally made it work. Again, yeah, Sigourney's performance brought the nurturer to that character rather than the soldier, even while she's blasting shit with machine guns and flamethrowers. So fucking kudos to Sigourney Weaver, my god. So this one really, she got to indulge her desire to have Ripley die, and that is totally cool. I have no problem with this character dying. I wouldn't have had a problem with the trilogy ending on Ripley's death, but this film makes such a fucking show of it that becomes the plot of the film. It's a film about the death of Ripley. As soon as she finds out that she's got an alien growing in her chest, which happens fairly early in the story, her goal in the film is to die. Whee! And it's not even to kill the creature. The convicts force her to stay alive to help them kill the creature before, like her reward is like, oh, we'll kill you afterwards. Whee! So, yeah, that's the problem that this film has with me, ultimately. She does die a noble death, and it's a great scene, and the way they bring her back in Resurrection, I thought was perfect. So she gets to have that arc, but she still gets to keep going. So, yeah, that's where it is for me. All of that Fincher, but maybe especially Alien 3, none of it works for me. You could also draw a parallel, perhaps, between Alien 3 and The Last Jedi. An attempt to subvert audience expectations becomes more an exercise in trolling. At least it feels like that. Like, everything about the first film, fuck you, I don't know, it's interesting. Interesting stuff. So we go to Resurrection, a script written by Joss Whedon, which had a lot of fucking promise, and a really great idea to bring Ripley back, which is to clone her, which not only makes sense and works in a sci-fi context, but gives Sigourney the chance to play this character in a completely different way that does not feel inappropriate. And she does great with it. She, of course, again, is the best thing about this film. She fucking carries it on her shoulders. She's just fantastic. And the pros for this film, I think, outweigh the pros for me in Alien 3, which is ultimately why I have to favor this film over Alien 3, even though I really don't watch either of them very much at all these days, which says the most, I think. I love the fact that they hired this auteur director with an art film background, Junet. I don't know if he was the right choice, but I love the fact that they brought somebody like him into this. I love the fact that this blockbuster exploitation franchise has the kind of room to where these super visionary directors can come in and do their stuff. You know, these are high-class exploitation films. That's why I love them. Yeah, I don't think Junet was the right choice, although I love his films outside of the franchise. I think he's a fantastic director, and he did his best. He did his job, in terms of the film. I just don't think it worked. Primarily too much comedy. Like, more than just like there's humor in this film. There is flat-out comedy. And highly, highly inappropriate. Way too tonally different from the franchise. And that's why, even though, again, we go back to the basics, plot-wise, in a way that I really appreciated. Carlo Rossi, I believe, recently referred to Alien Resurrection as the sexy one. And yeah, pretty much, that's what they're going for. Finally, we get back to the sexual roots of the first film. I don't personally like how they did it. There were some design changes, and like as you know, I can't stand that shit. Like you need to be really faithful to the original designs. The eggs look different. They move differently. They do this weird gyraty thing that I guess looks more organic, but organic wasn't the point in Giger's designs. They were biomechanical. They were supposed to have a little bit of that kind of soullessness to them. You know, that's what made it scary. The creatures themselves, you know, the skull domes are back, and that's nice. They have this weird caramel color now, as opposed to the kind of black, green quality that the first one had, which is again not as scary. They're growling now as opposed to squealing, and I hate that. The one trick they pull off, kind of sacrificing their buddy to use his acid blood to escape the chamber they're trapped in, pure genius, fantastic scene. The idea of aliens swimming underwater, fantastic. I don't know if I loved how it was done, but the idea is great. The idea, I thoroughly enjoyed Ripley's group sex scene with the xenomorphs in the snake pit. That was wonderful. I liked Winona Ryder more than most people did. She played a fine robot. I don't know what the fucking problem was, and the kind of lesbian interplay between the two of them, even though it's not lesbian, it's actually interspecies, but really fucking hot. What do you want from me? So yeah, two films that are troubled for very different reasons, but I respect the reasons that trouble Resurrection more than I respect the reasons that trouble Alien 3, and that's why ultimately it's an objective choice, really, almost. You know, it's making a list and weighing, like, oh, well, this has 3 things and this has 2. That's kind of where I'm at with Alien 3 and Resurrection. I'm pro-Resurrection, personally. Not many of us out there. We're real freaks, we are, but we get by. And again, you know, even though I was ultimately disappointed by the choices made, I love the fact that this is a franchise where they were allowed to be so experimental, given the high budgets and the high commercial pressures this franchise has always been under. So it has stumbled a lot, but I have to even respect the stumbles that they made. And I cannot say that about any other franchise, which is why I will still say that despite all the heartbreak, this franchise has caused me over my life as a fan child, that Alien is still my favorite franchise. And goddamn, that first one is just about as good as filmmaking gets, isn't it? Okay, we're going to dive into the real crap next time. Have a good one. See you next week.